Welcome to this regular school committee meeting of Thursday, March 14th, 2019. I open with public participation. No? Okay, there is no public participation. I would like to welcome our AEA president, Mr. Jason Levy, for attending our meeting. And so we will go straight into the start time change for middle and high school. I'm not sure this is the exact wording that we voted last time, is it?
Wait, so which is?
It's to vote, we're going to discuss changing the start time.
This is
but
Ryan's final motion. What was the wording of your?
Yeah, it just, I'm thinking it doesn't look like the same.
Doesn't, well, let me see. Pretty close. I mean, this was, Len had the final.
Yeah. It'd be in our minutes,
The
right?
start time for middle school and high school to 8:30 a.m. beginning September 2019.
Okay.
That's what I have.
Okay, that's all? Okay. So I'm not sure if we have to remake the motion if we're doing it as a second reading. Anyone?
I would say just for the sake of clarity, we want to
Okay.
re-vote it again.
Okay.
So I move to approve. All right. I move to approve an 8:30 start time for the middle and high school, the middle schools and high school, starting September 2019.
Second.
Okay, so at this point, now we'll start the discussion. And did you want to bring the administration?
Yes, let me make a few comments, and I'll invite the administration to come. Actually, this evening, we have the principals of the high school, Addison and Gibbs, here that would like to share some of their thoughts on this motion. We also have the president of the AAA, the Administrators Association, Wendy Salvatore, who is going to speak this evening, as well as the vice chair of the Teachers Association, the AEA, Juliana Keys, who will also speak. So could I invite the principals to come up? And I'd like to sort of frame this a little bit before we begin. Everybody knows Dr. Janger, Mr. Maringer, and Ms. DeFrancisco. There has been many years of talk about the possibility of changing our start time to 8:30. In fact, 2 years ago, I brought to the committee a petition from, well, it's actually more of a statement from the Middlesex League superintendents, asking that Middlesex League districts consider moving start times into the window of 8 to 8:30. At that time, we were the only school district that was in that window. We were at 8 o'clock for both the middle school and the high school. So there was more discussion, and we were entering into negotiations with the AEA, and for that matter, the AAA, that following year. And what the negotiating team decided is that in order to be able to complete negotiations and ratification in a timely way, that this particular topic was going to need more discussion and was put into a calendar committee. The calendar committee met and decided that before we move forward with more investigation, more forums on this, that we would have a survey to both staff and to the community to just get a better understanding of the support for actually several calendar issues that were put forward to, well, the start time was unique. It was really an issue just simply about start time, but the other calendar issues, which we've talked a little bit more about, had to do with what the effect of dates are in the calendar on the last day of school in June. So tonight's discussion is not about that. So there was support. There was an analysis of the survey data. There was some strong support by the parents, and there was support, the majority of support for both the middle school and the high school. Middle school teachers were more in favor than the high school teachers, but they were a majority in support. So we then began looking at, so there was support, let's look at this more deeply. And there have been forums with the community, with the Community Relations Subcommittee. I have had forums with teachers at all 3 schools, Gibbs, Addison, and the high school. And we have learned, as we've been going deeper into this issue, that there are issues, which cause us to think that if we were to change, that we should delay it so that we can address some of the issues. And one of them, which was presented by high school teachers, was how are we going to measure success in this change? And we have not had a discussion about that. So anyway, last week, the last meeting, you invited me to ask the principals if they would join us tonight and just give us their thoughts, what they're hearing in their building, and then we'll invite the 2 presidents to join us too. All right, I don't know.
Great.
Who wants to start?
Want me to begin? I mean, I think that all of us, you're going to hear a common thread through what each of us talks about tonight. I don't think it's about not agreeing with the start time, because as principals and leaders, we've done a lot of research on a later start time for this developmental phase of a child's education, and there's lots of research to support it, and I think that we also support it too. I know that Brian and Matt will talk to you about their specific concerns about their building. The unique position that I'm in this year is when you're rolling out new things, you learn quickly that if you don't go slow to go fast, that blows up in your face for sure. So I think my concern as leader at Gibbs is that while I would be in favor of a change, and I really feel like most of the teachers are in favor of a change also, I am more so in favor of a thoughtful rollout. And what that looks like for me would be to think about the fact that even though we change the start time of school, we do not change the start time of the community's responsibility to show up at work. And so if I have 6th graders, they're not as apt to leave them at home alone. I'm worried about the student that's going to be dropped off at 7:15 in the morning, regardless of our start time, and what that looks like for us. And I'd like to be able to have some time to think about that. We also talked a little bit about, this puts the child's developmental age first when we make decisions about this start time. But the other thing that we want to think about when we're thinking about putting the child first is teachers. Teachers need to be in a position where they can sustain this change. Lots of our teachers have kids, so we've got to think about daycare and what that looks like. And they've already made arrangements for next year. I mean, that's the nature of what they're dealing with. They make arrangements years in advance for daycare. So we think about that a little bit. We also think about, as leaders, what does this mean for the contract that we have in existence for our teachers? This means for us that we can't start meetings currently after 2:45. So with this in place, with the start time and the end time changing, how do we pull teachers together to do that important collaboration as a building without compensating them? We would need to compensate them. So what is that fiscal burden that we would be putting on the system? So I think for Gibbs, while we would support the change, fall would be really hard for that to be a thoughtful rollout. And we really try to practice rolling things out thoughtfully. So I think that's where we stand at the 6th grade level.
I have to echo some of the same things that Kristen is talking about. So there's been increased chatter over the last week about start times from the faculty. And while I will say that, I think you do what's best for kids, and I think that I'm a proponent of a later start because of a lot of the surveys and studies that have done. I worry that I can't answer many of the questions my faculty is asking me because the rollout seemed to have really caught speed and momentum. So when one of the teachers said, has it been thought of an 8:30 start maybe at the high school, but an 8:15 start at the Audison and the Gibbs, because then you wouldn't have as many kids on the bus line, and so kids who are arriving late because they're taking the bus, have we thought about staggering those starts? And, I don't know how to answer that, or the person that says, a lot of times you see the kids dropping off at the Audison in the morning and then they're going to the elementary school. What would that be like for drop-off for parents? And I don't really have an answer. So I am a strong proponent of a later start time. I just don't know if this fall makes the most sense. I don't know if we're a year out from now. I also have, faculty members who have come to me and talked to about daycare and issues that they might have. People have asked me when we would have faculty meetings or department meetings. Could we have them before school, or what that would look like for the contract? So these are questions that I don't know. So, hoping that I obviously get some clarity. And I'm hopeful that we will adjust the start times, as I say, because I do believe you do what's best for kids, and in the long run, I do believe this is best in kids. I just don't know if this is a little too quick for the fall of next year.
Ditto. But, so one, I'm actually very happy that the school committee is trying to make a decision that they believe is supported by the research and that's in the best interest of kids, that's really focused on students' development. So that is a wonderful thing. When we got the sort of marching orders from the superintendents 3 years ago in the Middlesex League, the principals of the Middlesex League began talking about that pretty much every couple of months at our job-alike meetings, and some of the districts began to move. And so we've done a lot of thinking about kind of a lot of the pieces that affect us, but I think it's important to note that the focus of this is not about school start time. The focus of this is about student sleep. And Arlington right now has an 8 o'clock start time and the shortest commute of any of the schools in the league. So our students are already getting up on the late side for a lot of our programs. And that's part of why when we started having this conversation 3 years ago, I didn't come forward and say, this is urgent, we need to deal with it. Had we had an 7:30 start time, I think this conversation would have been much more urgent. But right now, we've got an 8 o'clock start time, which is within the window. Of the 12 schools in the Middlesex League, we are in the late 6. There are 6 between 7 and 7:30, and 6 between 8 and 8:30. And so I think moving to 8:30 makes a lot of sense, but it's important that, again, we do that in the reasonable and methodical way. We start building our plans and schedules for next year in December, right? So we're already building that plan now. Right now, we are sort of putting fine points on it and trying to figure out where the kids fit into that structure. And so in so many ways, the idea that we would simply move the start time and everything else would shift to accommodate that doesn't really sort of fit with the way people really do things. And I think Kristen said it really well, Brian has said it really well, but I think we really run the risk of unintended effects. If we move from 8 to 8:30, one of the things that happened in a number of the districts was some of the sports said, well, that's awesome now. We can have morning activities because there's enough time to get on the ice or to get out on the track. So the result was actually to give the kids less sleep. So if we're going to really do this in a thoughtful fashion, and I think we should, but we really want to do it in a way that maximizes the impact. We've been doing things already in the high school in terms of trying to push more of the senior privileges and senior other things to the first period of the day, which means that those students can sleep in and giving kids more flexibility about time. So if we want to have that conversation and we start it now, I think we can do it right in the fall of 2020. But I think if we do it in 2019, it's going to be disruptive for families, it's not going to have the intended impact, and it's going to be disruptive for teachers.
Want to put chair up, Julie and Wendy? And before we go into questions, let's have the perspective of the two associations.
Do you want us to just move back?
Huh?
Do you want us to just move back?
You stay there.
Stay? Whatever you want.
Hi, everyone. I'm Juliana Keys. I am the second vice president of the AEA. I was here last week and I listened to all of your debates and discussions, and I think that the majority of our faculty is not against this. They are against this year. And I think if you re-polled everyone right now, you would get very different numbers than you did in October. And the primary reason for that is that everything's already in place for September. Kids who have staff members who have families already have their kids in daycare programs, or if we move to a later start time, they would have to enroll their kids into extended day at their own elementary schools, and those programs are full. So we're all here because we want what's best for the kids in Arlington. That's what we do every day. That's why I let a 13-year-old give me a pie tattoo today for Pie Day. I think asking us to do that at the expense of our own families is a lot. And I think giving people time that they can make this adjustment, so announcing now or announcing in September that a year from now we're going to move the start time, makes a lot of sense. But this is a really big ask of the faculty. And we've already got people who are willing to do this, but it's going to push us more into rush hour traffic. It's going to extend our day. We're willing to do that, and I think go along with it because we think it's what's best for the kids. But not doing this in a thoughtful way is going to make people resentful about doing that, and that's not what we want here in Arlington.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, Wendy Salvatore, AAA president. The AAA has the feeling that, similar to what Matt said, we're already in the window of the 8 to 8:30, so why change it? The AAA's thought process is also similar to what Matt said, the concern of making sports and practices happen in the morning as opposed to in the afternoon, and so that's kind of counterproductive to the goal. And some of the administrators have felt that if parents still want to drop kids off, or if parents are still going to be looking for that early morning activity for, say, sixth graders, or even people at the Audison, kids at the Audison, because they don't trust or want to leave their kids at home, and they're still going to want morning activities, that there needs to be an administrator in the building. So you're looking at extending the day for the administrators to still have to be there at 7:15 as opposed to not getting in until 8 or 8:30. I mean, the start time is 8:30. Because it's just the responsibility of us as administrators, if you have kids in the building, that there should be an administrator in the building. So there's the concern that our day becomes significantly longer because you would still want to have morning activities in your buildings so that kids can be supervised while parents go to work. Thanks.
Do you have any?
Did you want
So,
to?
yes. So you've heard all of the rationales for this. So what I'm coming to you with the recommendation that should you have a vote tonight, that the vote would be to have a delay in the implementation of the start time at 8:30 in the high school to September 20. I would like to wait and perhaps a few months. There's some things we need to look at the middle school, the whole issue of whether it should be a different time, how would that mesh with schedules. There's a lot to look at. So to jump ahead and say, well, maybe that's the right solution for the middle school might be premature. So I would confine, I would urge you to confine a vote for the following year simply to the high school and continue some thoughtful ideas about what makes sense. One of the issues is should Addison and Gibbs, can Addison and Gibbs, besides should, even be slightly different too? We tried very hard not to have shared staff, but I think we're still going to have some, and we certainly are going to still have some, not a lot, between the high school and the middle school. But then as AAA president has said, Wendy Salvatore, that administrators, if we even have these wider windows, they're going to be on duty more, both in terms of being in the school at the beginning and then later. And that's something that needs to be looked at and discussed as well. So that's my recommendation for your consideration.
Dr. Seuss.
So
I'm actually going to vote against the current motion, but I do want to express my frustration with the current motion to move it to next year. I agree that there has not been a thoughtful rollout. I agree that we have not worked out these details. But I mean, the reason I voted for this last time is I was incredibly frustrated. We've been talking about this for 3 years. We've had 2 surveys under 2 AEA presidents. I've been asking for the past year, have we worked out all the details? Do we need to do outreach? Do we need to do outreach to the teachers? Do we need to do outreach to the community? Like, what else do we need to do? And been assured that everything was fine and we didn't need to do anything. We're all, teachers were all on board and there was no problems. And so I'm incredibly frustrated with that because it seems to me that all the work that I think we still need to do, because I agree that we need to do tons of work, detailed work, should have been done in the last 2 years. And that we just delayed it and just didn't deal with the problem, didn't think about it, weren't really thoughtful about it. And so it's been incredibly frustrating to me. So I agree that we are not ready. I agree that there are a bunch of details that need to be worked out. But I find this incredibly frustrating.
Mr. Schlick, oh, sorry, I think Mr. Cardin was first.
Thank you. Yes. So you said exactly what I was planning to say. I've been on the Community Relations Subcommittee. My first meeting as a school committee member was 3 years ago, and we first, at this table, talked about it. So everybody knew we were talking about it. Dr. Janger, you've said you wanted an 8:30 start time. When I went to the 8th grade parents' night a year and a half ago, you said it was coming, hopefully this year. So the idea that we're taken aback by it, I understand that perhaps there were some internal communication problems within the administration, but at our table with Dr. Bodie, we've been planning for this to occur first in September of 2018, because that's when the new AEA contract is going to start, and then because of the calendar committee, we delayed it for a year. So it should have been clear to everyone that we were planning to do this for September 2019 if certain hurdles were met. One of the hurdles was the survey showing positive support for it. We did a survey twice. Both times there was positive support for it. And so there was a failure here to get this done. And I think the lesson learned for us is that we need, as a committee, to be more clear and direct the administration to come back to us with a plan. So if my motion goes down, and if we adopt Dr. Bodie's plan, I would suggest that for the middle school part, we direct her to come back with a plan by June of what we're going to do in the middle schools next year.
Okay, Mr. Schlickman.
Okay. I hear the arguments that it'd be a hardship adopting a change for 2019 tonight. What I think we should do, and I'm going to offer an amendment to the motion on the table to change the word 2019 to 2020, that will cement in the intention right now that we're going to have an 8:30 start time in 2020. Now, if between now and June, the administration comes back and says, we've talked to the middle school, maybe we want to do that at 8:15 staggered would be better, we can revisit it. But I want a firm motion right now that says what we are doing. And the way to do that right now, I think with the consensus of the committee, is to say, with this motion, amend 2019 to 2020, cement it in right now. And if we need to make an adjustment, we can make an adjustment. But if there's no adjustment, no further vote of the committee, we're starting at 8:30 in 2020. So that's my amendment, Madam Chair, to amend the prevailing motion to delete 2019 and insert 2020.
Okay, do I have a second for the?
Second for the purposes of discussion.
Okay. Do you want to speak to the
Yes.
amendment?
Well, no, to the whole thing, both.
Okay.
I agree with everything people said. I see no difference. Without what Mr. Schlickman just said, we're right back where we were 3 years ago with the opportunity to postpone it and postpone it and postpone it. I can only support something that is definite. And I will accept the fact that there might be something catastrophic, something might prevent it from happening, but everyone in this room, out in the community, should know tonight when this is going in place by this committee, one way or the other, whether it's 19 or 20. I don't want to leave this until that's decided. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak for or against the amendment or the motion?
Dr. Jane.
Yeah, that's what,
So since I was mentioned by name, I would just like to respond a little bit. We are 100% prepared. We have 100% done our homework to be able to move the start time of school. We've been prepared and waiting for 2 or 3 years. We do not set the schedule, the school committee does. And with a 1-year notice that this was the target date that we need to move forward, I'm ready to move forward. But the first notice that I got that the school committee was voting on a start time was last week. So I'm ready to go, but I'm not ready to go in March. And if there was a miscommunication, I apologize, but we are ready to do this and we are ready to move forward on it. But I've never gotten a clear instruction that there was a timeline for rollout. So with the timeline, we're ready to go. But it is a timeline that requires people to have notice a year in advance. So the issue is not that we're not ready with the things that we need to do or the issues that need to be raised. The issue is that people need a 1-year timeline to get notice in order to do it. And that's the concern that we're raising.
Dr. Seuss.
So I couldn't agree more. I mean, that has been something I've been pushing for a long time, and that's why I was frustrated that in the past year, every time I asked, do we have a plan? Have we reached out? Have we done this? There was nothing. It was silence. And I just got the assurance, oh, we're fine. It's not a problem. We can vote on this later. It's not a problem. So, believe me, I completely agree. I mean, institutional change is hard, and it doesn't happen quickly, and you always need a year. So the fact that we weren't looking at a year, the fact that we didn't vote in this in the fall, or didn't do the legwork a year ago, was problematic. So I absolutely agree with you, and I'm not, and that's why I'm voting against the original motion. I actually will be supporting the substitute motion, and I get it that we might want to switch the middle school. Actually, as a parent in East Arlington, I know very well how difficult it is to get on the bus. And a stagger time to me makes some sense, so we can come back and revisit that. But again, that should happen in this year. I mean, we should not wait, months and months and months in the future.
Okay. Does anyone else want to speak for or against the amendment or the motion? Okay. So first we will vote on the amendment, which was to change the year 2019 to 2020 in the amendment. In the motion to change the start time. So all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, any abstentions? Okay, so that passes 6-1. Now we vote on the motion, which is now changed to change the start time for middle and high school. Vote to approve 8:30 start time for middle and high school in September 2020. Okay. All in favor?
Which one? Hold on.
Do it in the original motion, so amended.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's the original motion to change the start time for the Addison, Gibbs, and high school to 8:30 and 2020.
We have the amendment,
Okay.
and now we have
So,
to approve the motion.
I think it's the understanding that the superintendent and staff might come back and say, we can start the high school at 8:30 and the Addison at 8:12 or something.
And we vote a new motion.
It's,
I mean, we have the right to revisit it,
yeah.
Yeah.
and I think it's the intent of the committee that we'd be open to revisiting the middle school times before June.
So I'm,
Just sort of the intent of the committee.
because I heard different things at the table. I heard directed Kathy that people would like a plan by June, and then I'm hearing a motion.
No, the motion does not reflect what Dr. Bodie asked.
Right.
The motion says middle and high school. Some at the table have expressed the concern that if we don't clearly define that we need to do both, that we'll be in the same position with the middle school. If you want to amend the motion again or offer a substitute motion, we can do that. But right now, the motion is approve the 8:30 start time for middle and high school, September 2020.
Well, then I'll speak to the motion. I'm not sure I'm able to come up with wording on the fly here. I mean, I heard that the leadership would like to have the high school start at 8:30 in 2020 and have time to think through the start for the Odison, and the Gibbs.
Do you want to offer to amend the motion by striking the words middle school out of the motion?
That's the only way I can do it?
Or we could offer a new motion.
Well, I would, yeah, okay, so why don't, you want, then I'll offer a second motion after that's more thought through and a little more comprehensive
Can I have a
direction.
point of clarification, please?
Yes.
Mr. Schlickman already stated that anytime we want, we can change the starting and ending times within contractual issues. So, Mr. Thielman, what I'm suggesting is leave this alone. The superintendent needs to come to us to make an adjustment for one of the two schools. We're open to listen and do it. Otherwise, I mean, you can do whatever you want as far as motions, but I think we're going to get really bogged down in amendments back and forth.
Okay. So are you offering your amendment?
Yeah, I'm going to offer an amendment.
Okay, I need a second.
I didn't make it yet.
Amendment to second, yeah.
I didn't make my amendment.
What, Dr. Burns?
Yeah. Thank you. The intent of what I said was that we do need more time to have a proposal. As long as the committee understands that we might come back with something different than what you're voting tonight, I just thought it would be cleaner to defer it and have a time certain when we would have the proposal to you, which we could do.
So-
We could have a time certain sometime this spring, but we don't, so that was what I was
Okay, so can I make
suggesting.
my amendment?
Yes.
Can I speak now? What, Bill, okay if I talk?
Give it a shot.
So I'm going to amend Paul's motion with the words, because the motion now reads, move to,
Vote to approve 8:30 start time for middle and high school, September 2020.
yeah, and then comma, then I'm going to amend it to comma, and direct the superintendent to deliver a detailed plan for the opening times for both levels of both the middle school and the high school by the last meeting in June.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay.
By what meeting in June?
Last meeting in June.
June of
Okay.
2019.
That doesn't change the main motion. It's
No,
like a
it
second
doesn't.
motion. It works.
Okay.
We can vote on it.
And that was a second
No,
by Paul?
that's,
No, it's a.
no, it's
a friendly
amendment to tack
amendment.
on, comma, and directing the superintendent
Fine.
to prepare,
Like I said.
So you got the comma,
Yep.
and direct the superintendent
Yep.
to present a detailed plan for the start times, for the 2020 start times for the middle and high schools, by the last meeting in June of by the last school committee meeting in June of 2019. Does that work?
Okay. Okay. Mr. Schlickman.
I will support Mr. Thielman's amendment. I mean, the reason why we want to do this now is that by passing this motion, we're stating that the baseline is we're going to be starting at 8:30 in 2020. So we've thrown that rock in the pond. We've staked out that territory. And I think the high school, I don't know that I'd be open to any other adjustments from that unless the construction folks said that there was some really compelling reason. For the middle school, I'd listen to a 5 or 10 minute stagger off of the 8:30 either way in order to accommodate buses or whatever, so that the 8:30 is not a hard time, but it's the baseline time. If you want to come up 5 minutes or down 5 minutes or adjust something on the middle school to make it work a little better because of logistics, that's fine. But the baseline is an 8:30 start. We're pushing it back a half an hour. And I think that Mr. Thielman's motion or amendment on that reinforces our commitment to an 8:30 start and our openness to a little leeway on the middle schools. A little leeway on the middle schools.
Okay. Mr. Hayner.
I was just going to say, this motion passes, this is a definitive statement by this committee of a change in the start time, so that going forward, nobody on any side of the table, outside in the public, staff, kids, parents, everybody knows we're on notice tonight.
Okay. Ms. Morgan.
So I think this has been a good experience for me to watch this. I mean, this seems crystal clear, right? Crystal. Because, I mean, I guess 3 years of conversations, surveys, delaying approving the start date on the calendar, which was done far more than a week ago, putting a whole spiel on the preschool application that we discussed that said we may change the start date for preschool. Apparently, all of that was not crystal clear. So I think it's good. I think it's really good that we're coming to a place where it's very specific and clear. I personally would have supported the motion to move it in 2019. I think that this is a very capable group, and I think we could figure it out. And I think that the work has been done, but we're not going to get consensus about that here, so that's fine. I think it's good that there's 7 of us, and it means that we got to get a majority of people to do that. So. But I think it's really good for all of us to have this experience because, what was clear to us wasn't clear to them. And that's when things don't work, then they don't work. And I think sometimes we as a committee, and I think, gosh, if I'm sitting here all night, not with my kids and my family, that everybody else must be paying attention to what we're talking about at this table. And I mean, clearly that's not true. I would love it if it was, but it's not, which is fine. But I really, I hope that we can, I've learned a lot from this. And I'm disappointed that we're not able to move forward more definitively for the fall. But I also, I think that if we can make a decision, a decision is better than indecision, which is where we've been for weeks. And that's been a real problem. So I think anything is better than not doing anything tonight. So I am I don't know where we are at on motions or sub-motions. I'm going to support the motion that we go send the whole cart to 8:30, and then, if the superintendent or, the middle school team comes back and says, gosh, we really need 8:10 or 8:20 or, in order to accommodate X, Y, or Z, then I would be happy to take it up again, but it seems to make sense to me. I think if we go with everybody 6 through 12 to 8:30, we're going to be closer to where we're ultimately going to land than if we send 9 through 12 to 8:30 and keep 6 through 8 at 8 o'clock. I think the average, the net, if we put everybody at 8:30, we're going to be closer to where we may finally land. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, does anyone else want to speak to or against the amendment? Mr. Thielman's amendment? Okay. So all those in favor of Mr. Thielman's amendment of Mr. Schlickman's motion?
Can I have a point of clarification? Sorry.
Yes.
What are we looking for at the last meeting in June? What type of detailed plan?
A detailed plan.
I mean, because we heard a year ago, oh, it's fine, we got a plan, it's good, it's all working. And then we heard recently, oh, wait, there's no plan. So what exactly would a detailed plan look like?
I think some thought, so I would say that they will have done some thinking, and they will say, based on our examination of the schedule, the bus schedules, our sense of our staff, we're going to start the middle school at X hour, and we're going to start the high school at X hour.
Okay, so just the time, but not,
That's it.
okay,
And
not
so
say the before school
That's it.
time
So that'll be it.
issues
You
and,
plan it out, you talk about it as a team,
okay.
you look at different options, you run different schedules, and you have different start times.
Okay.
High school, Addison, Gibbs, all by the last meeting in June.
Okay,
And this is when it will be.
okay, thanks.
Clarification. So are people walking out of here tonight thinking that the high school is definitely going to change September 20? And we're looking at a report from the high school, for the middle school?
The motion reads now.
Everybody is starting at 8:30 in 2020?
Comma,
and a report to the
and a
school.
report,
with a-
so
Which we can
On its
then,
implementation.
if you come back and you and your team say, the way to make this work, because of transportation, because of the number of minutes we have to have in the day, because of, common planning time, because of whatever it is, we're going to have the Gibbs start at 8X, and the Odison start at 8Y, and the high school start at 8Z. That's what we want. The plan.
Okay.
On the second meeting of June, the last meeting of
Last
June.
meeting, June, yeah.
2019, Anno Domini.
Okay. Mr. Schlickman?
I would say that I'm not going to speak for the rest of the committee, but my sense is sitting here listening to the conversation and thinking very positively about Mr. Thielman's motion is that high school's 8:30 unless there's something huge going on to move that. And we can adjust the two middle schools plus or minus a little, but the baseline is 8:30 for all of it. Come up with an implementation plan. If you're saying that the Odison should start at 8:20 and the Gibbs should start at 8:40 because of transportation, yeah, okay, that's not a problem. But we want to get it out of 8 o'clock. We want to put it at 8:30 right now, and if we want to move it a little bit from the 8:30, the Odison or the Gibbs, I'm open to that. But the high school, you're going to need a really, really huge reason sitting in front of us to move it off at 8:30 in my mind.
So the idea of that happening in June means that everybody has 14 months to plan.
You know,
Yep, absolutely.
Teachers, staff.
Yep.
at that point, we're done, and that's the decision. We walk out of here, June, telling everybody what it's going to be in a year, and life is good.
Because I heard that teachers have booked daycare,
Yep,
right? So if you tell people 14 months in advance, that's over.
yep, yep.
So that's it. Last meeting in June. What's the date of the
Okay.
last meeting in June?
Do we have any other discussion?
June 20, I think it's late, but
Yeah, well, maybe it should be the
Maybe
second
it should be
meeting.
the first meeting in June,
you want-
just
yeah,
to
it's-
make sure that if we,
it's the
yeah.
14th and the 28th.
Do you want to say the 14th?
June 14th.
Well, I
yeah.
said the last meeting in June, so if we decide not to have a last meeting in
Right.
June,
It
then
becomes
Second meeting, will it be on the
then
first?
the last meeting is the 14th,
Yeah.
Yeah.
by definition.
13th.
13th,
Oh, I'm sorry, 13th? Yeah.
yeah.
So 13th and 27th, it would have been, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have other comments on the amendment? For or against? Okay. All in favor of Mr. Thielman's amendment of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously. So now we're going to vote, or does anyone want to make any more comments on the, okay, good. Now we're going to vote on the motion, which now reads, vote to approve an 8:30 start time for middle and high school in September 2020, and directing the superintendent to deliver a plan at the last meeting in June on implementation. The last bit was, I didn't write it down, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it, Karen?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that passes unanimously.
20th. Oh, we don't have one on 13th. 6 and 20. So I was confused. 6 and 20.
We're meeting on the 6th and the 20th, so.
Yeah, I was like, it didn't match my calendar.
Well, I'm just going by my phone, I don't have my.
6 and 20 is when we have our meetings.
Okay.
Okay, so
So
the last one we do the 6th.
I think
You and I almost went.
at this point, we move on to the Gibbs School update.
Well, since Steve Francisco and Ms. Salco were going to be here anyway this evening, we thought this would be a good night to so they don't come out twice, to be able to give us an update on Gibbs. I'm going to let them talk about it, but I do want to say that I want to publicly acknowledge all the work Kristen and Wendy have done on this. It's really been an enormous effort, and to their teachers as well, the planning, the collaboration that has gone into the success of this year is really due to their leadership, and also to the sense of community and collaboration at the school. But I also want to mention that Kristen just recently was part of a committee through the Massachusetts School Superintendent's Association for the annual Women's Leadership Conference. And she did an absolutely fabulous job in organizing probably one of the best conferences that we've had.
Thank you.
So want to acknowledge that. And she's going to talk a little bit about another acknowledgement that Gibbs has had this year with our Maple Collaborative. So-
For PBL. First of all, thank you very much for having us here tonight, both to give our opinion on the start time. We always appreciate that, being able to talk a little bit about, how it's going to, what the ripple effect will be for something like that. And also to be able to just come back and talk a little bit about, it feels like it's maybe been 3 years since we started the launch. We've put in a lot of work, and, I said to Wendy when we started, we need to hit this out of the park. And, I think I turned to her the other day and said, we hit this out of the park. I really feel like it's been exceeded what I thought it would exceed for a launch year with an endeavor as large as this. When you think about, we still didn't have permanent occupancy in late August. So we were moving teachers in, and we were figuring out where everybody was going to be and go, and we were asking a group of a faculty of teachers that were pretty well established to uproot and come to a very new, innovative endeavor. And they've done that with Stars and Stripes, for sure. When I thought about how I was going to organize this tonight, I thought about the stakeholders and talking to you in that way about the different groups of stakeholders that we've been working with across this year. The first was parents. We really wanted parents to feel comfortable with their students coming to school in a new place where we were taking a lot of risks and doing a lot of new things. In hindsight, those forums were the best idea. I think we maybe did 5 of them. They became very popular. They were standing room only. I can say I sold out the Stratton cafeteria and the Hardy gym, and it was fun to be able to talk about what we were going to do and to be excited about what we were going to do. It is honestly, and I've said this to Wendy and to Kathy, this is my 6th year as a principal. This is the first year, even though communication at Hardy was fantastic, that I feel like the transparency there was key. And the way that Wendy and I continued that throughout the year is, I'm writing Sunday greetings every Sunday evening out to parents to give them a little bit of a window into the week, to demystify 6th grade a little bit. And I can't tell you the amount of still emails that I get after those Sunday greetings saying thank you. It's really neat to know what you're doing during the week. 6th graders don't always come home and tell you that. And so it's really nice to be able to hear from you and from Wendy what's going on in the building. And I sprinkle in some advice there. You might want to use this language, or you might want to try that, or this is coming up. So I think that has been key. The attendance that we've had at the events, at the ribbon cutting, at the art shows, at the music concerts, parents are coming out at dinner time to just come and fill the school. And it's really fun to see that. Wendy went to the first art show. I went to the second art show. Gives you the opportunity to really reach out to parents, and they're still coming up and introducing themselves in the sense they don't drop them off at school or pick them up from school. So those are our opportunities to really meet those parents in a more personal way, and they have really nice things to say. We've created partnerships. I think the sum up of that is we've created partnerships, and parents feel like there's partnership there. Would you have anything to add about parents?
No, I'm just thinking about the guy with the ice melt. I know he wasn't happy about it,
No,
but
we
he still
had-
came and did it.
We said
which
we
was
had a
like-
parent helped us out the other day. We were icing the back lot and trying to ice the front, and he got his ice melt out of the car and was sprinkling on the sidewalk.
I think
So
he was upset
he
that
was-
the sidewalk wasn't perfectly
but we've
de-iced,
we've
but
teamed.
he helped us with that, so that was
and,
great.
and it feels like that's what it's been, and that's what we wanted it to be.
Right.
We wanted it to feel like a partnership, and we really feel like it's been that. The next big, of course, important stakeholders, we've got teachers. I saved kids for last. The teachers, we asked them to unlearn a lot of things and relearn a lot of things, and that's what this year has been about. They've really unlearned some things in the sense that, we've implemented responsive classroom, which is a whole nother way of language to talk with kids. So asking teachers to get used to that has been something we worked with. We've gelled as a team, better than, it's only March, and we've only been together for 7 months doing this work. And we've really gelled as a team. They've embraced lots of new things. Our mantra is we're going slow to go fast. We put the word pilot in front of everything because really everything is new for us. Take a lot of feedback, a lot of, how did that go? What would we do differently next time? So we've practiced that quite a bit. New protocols that have linked us in a way that there's consistency across learning communities, which I think is something that's hard to do in a middle school where you've got these communities within communities. What are we going to land on that's the same, no matter what? What can we look at a parent and say, your 6th grader will have non-negotiable? And so we've worked on those things and are proud of, what we've come up with. And you can see that the kids, it doesn't matter which teacher asks them or says to them, oh, that's great, that's exactly what I would expect to see. Or you know what, that's unexpected. It doesn't matter which teacher it's delivered from because the kids know what that language means. So that common vocabulary has been super helpful. Anything else about teachers? Feel free to jump in. Okay. Students, 3 U's. You heard about that understanding, unified, and unstoppable, and we've really got them using them. I mean, I have kids coming to me and say, I'm sorry, Mrs. DeFrancisco, but I really saw something that was pretty ununified, and we need to be unified here, and so I'm going to tell you what I'm not tattling, I'm just telling you what it is. And so we really have students using that language more and more, which was the goal, which is great. I wish each and every one of you could have seen the first assembly that we had in September and the assembly we just had at the beginning of March. And we've taught kids, 471 6th graders, how to sit in a gym together and really pay attention.
That's an accomplishment.
Which is really an accomplishment. And we praise them up and down for that last assembly that they just did. It's a skill. They need to know it. They need to know how to behave in unstructured places. And I'm telling you, they've got it. And because they do, they've enjoyed, 4 or 5 maybe slideshows. Yep. We made it a point to really make sure we took pictures around the building of projects and things they were doing in the hall and singing and all sorts of things. And every couple of, about 6 to 8 weeks, they see that. We put together a slideshow and they watch themselves being understanding and unified and unstoppable, and they cheer for each other. And that's a really powerful thing for us, I think, as administrators and for teachers, too, to be able to watch that's a real tangible, that it's working. They have a voice. That was an important part of our mission, is to help kids advocate, have a voice. We're just about to launch an internal basketball league. The kids came with a very professional one-pager about why this was a necessary thing for them to have and, what it would do. It was born out of the staff versus student games. We had a volleyball one, we had a dodgeball one, and we had a basketball one. Hysterical.
Well-attended.
Very
by
well-attended.
Staff and students. The amount of
Some people
students that are
watched.
coming to watch and the staff, they're saying, I'm in. And, hanging out
very
after
cool
school
to
with
see.
kids to play has been really nice.
And getting to see teachers in a different light, I think, is always helpful for them. So we're going to launch that, and we've got some parents who volunteered to come out and coach and be referees, and so we've got 7 teams that are going to be playing each other, which is great. And I think that the modeling that we've done for students about being reflective and knowing that sometimes things don't work and we have to stop where we are and be reflective and refresh and recalibrate has definitely been a hallmark of the things that we're doing. So students, they're happy. I think they're proud to be students at Gibbs, and that's kind of what I live here too. So I hear these things around town also on the weekends that and when I get introduced, it's never as just Kristen DeFrancisco. It's usually Kristen DeFrancisco, oh, she's the principal at Gibbs. And so, it's nice to hear from the people that I share the town with, that they feel things are hearing things are going well.
And I live in Reading, and there's a woman who just moved into one of the condos next door to me, and she said to me, I was out walking my dog the other night, and she's a smoker. No, and some of you might be, which is fine. But she was outside smoking a cigarette, and I was walking my dog, and she said, one of the girls here said that you work in Arlington, and I said, I do. I'm the assistant principal at the Gibbs, and she was like, I grew up in Arlington. Oh, I can't wait to tell my parents that you're the assistant principal at the Gibbs. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
imagine that.
Imagine that. I think you bring up, you remind me that everything that happened from that ribbon cutting on, I mean, the legacy that that school has meant for Arlington, you know, it makes us proud to be able to you know, kind of ring that bell for people. It certainly, you know, makes your work feel really important. Programming was something that we talked a lot about when we were launching the school, and I came and talked to you before we launched about responsive classroom and advisory and a social emotional learning focus, and really having kids feel like they can show up and take risks and make mistakes. And part of that was through advisory. So if you remember, advisory sits in the front of 4 of our days for our 6-day cycle. And Wendy and I oftentimes will move around the building and we learn new social games and we learn things that kids are doing. And it's really powerful what happens in a school when everyone's doing the same thing. When you start out a day of 20 minutes where every student is involved socially with one another and you can walk around and watch what that looks like, it becomes just the way you do things around here, as I like to call it. Kids know what's expected of them. They run their own games. They make requests to do this. They're reflective. They set goals.
Growth
And that,
mindset notebooks.
they have growth mindset notebooks that they're working in. They've learned to say, I can't do this yet, but there's things I can do that will help me learn how to do this. So that feels really great. That culture of what we're doing around, how we do things around here has really come to fruition. The RC language, I mentioned that standard language of talking growth mindset, and you know that's not expected, and we know they know because we've told them what is expected, and paying attention to that developmental phase that they're in. We've also talked a ton about logical consequences. You know, what does it mean when you damage something that's in a classroom? You got to fix it. You know, what does it mean when you really can't be outside because you're not able to follow those rules? Like, what does that look, feel, and sound like? You're still going to get exercise, it's just not going to be out there. You know, what does it look like when you're a member in the cafeteria? You know, what does it look like when you're not ready for class? What does that look like? Where do you go? What do you do? How do you get ready? We've talked about that all year long through all the threads of all of the things we've asked kids to do. It's harder than a typical consequence of you're going to miss this or you're going to miss that. It's hard. That's hard work, logical consequences, and they see that. Project-based learning, which Kathy alluded to when she very kindly introduced us. PBL is really the thing that we carved out space for that had, I will say in the best way, the least amount of front-loading for professional development, right? I mean, that was something we wanted to carve time out for. We wanted to make sure it was in there, and we've kind of professionally developed ourselves as we're going along. But lo and behold, we were recognized by MAPLE, which is a consortium that pays particular attention to personalized learning. And we took a group of 3 students who went and presented at their innovation conference. And they presented their final project, the Ultimate Rock and Roll CD. And they presented the rubrics that they created to decide which songs would end up on that CD and how those artists really did overcome adversity by using music. And I could not have been more proud of these students who are talking to people they do not know. They're answering questions. They're talking about the skills they learned to do their project work. And it's only one of the examples. It's only one of the final projects. So much so that they're going to come and take other school, people from schools that are interested in learning about personalized learning and PBL. We're going to host a learning walk on April 11th. So we'll give lots of kids chances to showcase their work. And what I think we've learned from it, we put together think tanks. We've got teachers thinking this out. Okay, let's do this next year. Let's do that next year. Let's build in a little more choice. Let's make sure we've got that foundation of those executive functioning skills. It's a really exciting part of our work. And we're growing. We're growing, and I'm proud of us that we weren't afraid to take that risk, because PBL is something that really gives kids those skills in this century that they need in order to be successful. I think they all know how to disagree agreeably. They're able to work in cooperative groups and plan and research. And we've given them the freedom to make mistakes and to really learn around that.
And I feel like teachers during the project block really kind of had the space to kind of take things slow and really differentiate for the kids that they had sitting in front of them, as opposed to it being, really driven by curriculum or being really driven by frameworks. They were, I think of like Lisa Lambert, for example, had a fairly tough group of kids kind of in front of her with varying learning abilities and whatnot, and kind of came to us and said, so I'm just going to throw what I did during trimester 1 kind of up in the air and do something totally out of the box for this group, because I think this is what's going to really work. And it's really worked for the kids that she has in front of her, which I think has been, that's the nice piece of project block that I've seen also.
And it's lent itself to reflection for the kids, because there's a rubric at the end of it where they're actually self-reflecting on those skills we just talked about. And that goes to the next teacher. So they really see it as a work in progress. The pressure of a grade being not, they're evaluated on what they did, but it's the presentation, it's the work, and it's not the A at the end of it. It's really powerful to watch it. And teachers are saying, oh, we need to do this so that by the end, we're doing a school project, and it can be seen by the community. So they're starting to really kind of own it, which is nice to watch. A couple more things before I certainly would be happy to answer any questions you might have. School council and advisory, it's very interesting to run a building and write a school improvement plan when everything's new and everything needs to be improved. And so my approach this year was really to kind of catalog the things that we were doing within the year to improve, but really I want to lean on teachers and the school council members to get feedback. So we're going to be using our time to design, some feedback surveys and looking at those surveys so we can figure out what we want to tweak and change for next year. And we're also going to meet with the advisory council that helped us along as we were planning the school before it even opened. We've got a meeting on the books to reconvene with them so that we can get some feedback there also and include that in our work. And the last thing that I will formally talk about will be the transition piece. So we talked a lot about this, and we're now transitioning kids and transitioning them out in a year. So we've completed all of our 5th grade special education transition meetings. I've been around to just about every one of the 5th grade schools, the 5th grades in the schools, rather, to introduce myself and to do my speech and to get them excited about coming to school. And we'll plan our second round after April vacation. The meetings this year felt very different because we really have lived it, and so we can be more informed with what we say to teachers and to the kids. And now we're actually just about on the precipice of building the 7 and 8. So Jason has come over, and so has Maureen, and they've started to look at classrooms, and they're starting to think about, okay, you use expected and unexpected. Let's think about how we can integrate that into our language. And, I've talked about to Brian about, is there a way we could call them learning communities? Would that be a big disruption? And so that's on the table. I think it's been officially decided yet because we want to be mindful of leadership committees in both places, but we're really starting to figure out what's the low-hanging fruit here. What can we bring up to Audison that's really going to help kids feel like, I know what this means. This isn't a totally different country. And so we're creating surveys for teachers to fill out at the 6th grade level to go to the 7th grade level, and we're modeling that on our 5 to 6 transition. I feel like we had a little bit of a lull in the middle of that January, February. We were kind of just doing our thing. Yeah. And now we're ramped up again to try and figure out how we're going to get all these kiddos out and all the new kiddos in. So there is never a dull moment at Gibbs, I can promise you that. And everyone hits the ground running in the morning. It's been I feel blessed to have this opportunity. I feel blessed to work with somebody who gets the vision and who is 100% behind the vision, and her doing what she does in the general operation of the day allows me to do a lot of thought leadership, and it allows us to do some of that thought leadership together. I mean, Kathy and I sat for 2.5 hours this morning and just talked and kind of brain dumped about what these next steps were. So I think we're really creating something that Arlington's going to enjoy for a very long time, and 6th graders are really going to benefit from having that year to figure it out before they push off into those next years of their middle school journey. So I'm proud of the faculty, I'm proud of the kids, I'm proud of the parents for partnering. I'm proud of the administration and the people in my huddle which is a word we used a lot on Monday at the leadership conference. Kathy referenced that we're doing really good things. So I appreciate your willingness to see this vision through, and the audience should just hear about it. Feels good to talk about it, to talk about the successes, and we're happy to answer any questions if we didn't touch upon it in any of those areas.
Great. Thank you very much,
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Hayner.
Heard nothing but positive stuff,
Oh, good.
but let me ask you, how are the neighbors?
Good.
Things are good?
Good, yeah. I mean, we had a couple of reach outs about, I think we're getting to know how to get rid of snow there and what that looks, feels, and sounds like. And so there was a couple times when, we might have had a call and said, the pathway wasn't this, and then we got out and shoveled it, and we kind of tweaked what we were going to do for the next time. But no, they've been great. A lot of them showed up to the ribbon cutting.
Awesome, great.
Yeah, so it's been nice. Lots of dogs. Have the dog window. Can sit in my office and watch.
Kristen's office and see all of the dogs.
They all
that
come
walk
by, and
during
they
the
stop
day.
at the
It's like
window and
insane.
sniff at the window.
Dog walkers.
Yeah.
like 5
It's very
of them.
homey in there, for sure. Yeah.
Sometimes that might be the highlight of the day.
Well, maybe. Some days
It's great.
Some
It's
days in
great.
education, you take what you can get, and I
some
think we
days
all
are
know
tough.
that.
Yes.
But most of the days have been more positive than not.
Yes,
I'm really pleased.
Ms. Morgan?
So the description of the really happy and engaged kids has absolutely been my daughter's experience, and I feel very fortunate for that. I know, and I was really pleased that you were talking about working with school council and soliciting some feedback, because it's sometimes hard to ask for feedback for something that you've this was never going to be it was going to be amazing, but it was never going to be perfect out of the gate, and it can sometimes be hard to solicit feedback from people who don't understand the enormous constraints that you're operating under. But I do think it's really important, because I think that this cohort of parents particularly feels really invested in this school. They understand that this was a gift, frankly, from the voters in Arlington to make this happen, right? And that they that this group of parents, I think, is singularly invested in the success of this program, even if it's their first or last or only kid who's coming through. So I do think that tapping into that before they're fully, heading Brian's way would be really valuable, and I'm glad to hear that you're going to do it. And I hope that, my daughter's experience has been, tremendously positive, but I think in seeking feedback from the kids, she could tell you a couple of things that you probably don't know about that would be helpful, and I think that and not necessarily that they're changeable, but that maybe in aggregate it causes the stream to shift just a little bit in either direction. So I think it's great that that you guys are open to that, and that you're going to ask for that. And I think it'll mean a lot, especially to this cohort that believes in being a part of this, and that it's been so special for them. And not that your next group isn't going to be equally, there's not going to be as equally formative, but these are the parents, I talk to people all the time, and they're like, oh, I have a 5th grader, and oh, my older daughter went to the Audison, and this was hard, and that was this, and I'm like, I usually say, gosh, I think you're going to be okay there. I think you're going to have, I am not tend to be a hyperbolic, I'm not oh, it's going to be the best thing, I'm like, I think you're really going to be okay. I think you're going to be happy there. But this is the kind of group that's going to continue to say that and share those things. So I think, getting some feedback from these, obviously from faculty as well, but I'm glad to hear that that's something you guys are open to doing.
Yeah, and we'll get feedback from students and advisory, so at the end, we plan on coming up with a survey, but I'd like a group of kids to help us come up with that survey. I don't want that to just be adult-driven, and you're right, I always tell kids, and I, remind my own children, and pay attention to the firsts. The firsts are really special. The rest is going to be great too, but the firsts, this school has grown up with this, right? I mean, it's been us and it's been the parents, and I couldn't have asked for a better partnership. And I've said that before to Wendy, that I appreciate that feedback. There's nothing more that I want than this to fly successfully for years. And they also, so you know, I've already started giving me feedback. They give me feedback every single day. And it's great. It's advocacy, and it usually starts out with, please don't be mad. I am not going to be mad. You know, it's nice to be able to help them practice those conversations too, because they learn that there's ways to give that kind of feedback respectfully, right? So,
And
yeah.
it would be
So
nice
thank you.
if there were some similar questions that could be asked year over year, which might potentially give you some insight into
Of how
the
we're doing.
cohort. Well, and then give you some insight into like, wow, you know, we had this whole like cohort of melancholic kids, Brian, good luck. You know, but I mean, like, I mean, I do think that, you know, if you do things thoughtfully and ask some questions, you may be able to get a sense of what your cohort looks like. And I'd also be interested in if, you know, were there questions you could ask at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year? I mean, and clearly, like, my God, they got in there this year. So it was, yeah, right? Like, weren't going to be doing any, like, pre and post surveys. But, and maybe not even next year, but it would be nice to think about, you know, are there things we can ask here and there? And, you know, is there something we can learn from that? So
You remind me too, we talked, Wendy and I talk about this a lot also. I said, well, we modeled that incorrectly, clearly, because they're really doing it well. We modeled that well incorrectly. There's some things we're already going to change. I mean, we need to talk a little bit about recess and the fact that they're coming from places with fields and day two, where are the swings? And do we have a structure? I mean, they need some heads up that those things are not going to be there, and recess looks different, and how do you move through the hallways differently? I mean, we certainly have some definite ideas about how we will model some of that stuff differently in year two. And, you know, how we will already do the assemblies a little bit differently. We've been taking a lot of notes. I write letters to myself. They're called Dear Kristen. Dear Kristen, in September, do this. Dear Kristen, in October, do that. And it kind of helps us keep track a little bit of that kind of stuff. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Mr. Schlickman.
When we were all sitting together a couple of years ago, figuring out, okay, we're going to have this school, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to split the town, or are we going to go and have a sixth grade school? One of the persuasive arguments that I heard, and particularly out of Needham, who had done this before, was that this is a great opportunity to bring kids together from the 7 elementary schools, bring them together, create them a class in a safe environment, and then move them up to the Ottoson. It sounds like you're really engaged in that, and I hear from your language that you've been very reflective from day one as to, okay, this is what we did the first time. So my follow-up question to us, or need us to know about, that would support you in moving forward and opening school next year?
You know, I think that what we've talked about is this 2-year plan, you know, so we're really trying, we don't want it to feel like another first year, right? The faculty can't do another first year, we can't do another first year. It's got to feel pretty solid. So I think supporting what we have in place in order to do that again, you know, and that has been some shifts, and I know budget things are still kind of milling around, but, you know, we've taken on a reading of somebody to do the reading block that we needed to do, and then we're going to need to maintain that. And we want to think about how we are looking at this new cohort, because Jane had mentioned the cohorts are going to change every year. So this year we had a certain profile of what we were coming up for special education. It's different next year. And so I think the flexibility to really grow to know that Gibbs is not going to always look the same will be really important as we move through the future. I think this first 2-year block, and I've told the teachers this, we're not going to tweak the schedule too much. We made a little bit of changes. We're not going to tweak the way we do co-teaching too much. We need to do 2 years of it. So I think my answer would be, I appreciate you asking, and I'm going to pause and not say anything specific, but what I am going to say is that we're going to end up coming back with, okay, we've done this for 2 years. Here's what needs to change. It may impact the budget. We may need to ask for this. We may shift people. I didn't even know if you were still there, but I'm glad you are. We may need to think about how we share a little bit better with world languages and PE. Those are the kinds of things that I think are going to start to come up as we do this, and our enrollment increases. Because right now we have 470 students, 460? We have 460 students next year, and I've already got maybe 10 outside of district. Can I please have a tour? I think we're going to be up to around 480, and by the year after that, we'll be up to 500. We'll be looking at more lockers. So I think that I appreciate knowing that your head's there, and my head's there too, and after this second year, I think we'll know a little bit more. But knowing that coming up the pike, is there going to be that flexibility in us really looking at cohort to cohort? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And one more quick follow-up on that, traffic, parking, busing.
Okay, so we were also worried about transportation. I should have said this. We were also worried about transportation. The buses that we're doing, the 738, fine, totally fine.
The 7 o'clock students, the kids who get picked up at 7 o'clock are getting to school pretty early.
They do get there early,
They're
but we
there
do
by
have somebody there.
7:15.
Yeah,
They're there by 7:15, so they're there 45 minutes before the day starts.
but they're in the lot, and the buses are out of the lot,
Yeah,
and all
and-
of those things that we worried about, the insert.
That second
That's all fine.
route, those kids are probably walking in right about when the bell's ringing at 7:55, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Probably just because there's more traffic in town. At 7 a.m., they can get there pretty quick,
But no one's late.
but no one's late. But yeah, the buses have been fine. I think parking, I don't know, I'm there by 7:15, so parking's been fine.
Parking's been fine. I think the only issue we've had with staff parking is when it snowed. I mean, we did
Right.
lose some spaces, but other than that, everybody seems to be fitting quite nicely in that lot.
Drop-off seems fine. I mean, I'm in the
Pickup
office
is
in the
fine.
morning, so I'm seeing the cars, dropping the kids off. I think we could be better, and this was a learning thing for us with our custodians on how we clean up out front so that the kids can
Yeah.
get out of the cars and onto the sidewalk and not have to
With the
jump
snow.
the snowbank. But that was, I think, just something we
That's a
needed to
learning
learn.
curve. As far as traffic supervisors, I think you said that. Did you say that?
So traffic, parking, so anything that you're involved in, everybody coming in, everybody leaving, parking, you
Feels pretty
parking, visitor parking,
We
life
haven't had
is
anybody
happening.
Haven't had
come to
any
the door
problem. We
and
really haven't.
complain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Carden.
Thank you. So it sounds like, in your answer to Mr. Schlickman, that you're going to sort of let things ride for 2 years. Is there no major issues or changes with Project Block or band, chorus, orchestra, or foreign language selection process?
No, Kathy and I actually have a meeting tomorrow with the World Language Director, Dawn. But what we did decide to do was keep the 4 languages there for next year. I mean, again, we've only had 1 year, and I don't think it's a good idea to base our data just on that. I'd like to do another cohort and see what that looks like. So band, chorus, and orchestra will stay the same. Right now, chorus has 140 students in it. And I don't know if any of you came to the concert, but it was phenomenal. It's a lot, though, and we may cap that a little bit lower for James, though he could probably do 200 if we let him. But I think we need to bring that down a little bit. Band and orchestra have been fine. That sits at the end of the day, two of the cycle days. And that's also the day we have the majority of our project blocks. So those will stay the same. Project block, the only thing that will change about project block is if we are fortunate enough to get the interventionist that we've put into the budget for mathematics, those math teachers that now teach intervention will come into that
Teaching
teaching project block. So we'll actually have more to offer there. And as far as changes to programming there, that would be more along the lines of, we're looking at not shifting the kids. So it will be a project block group that they work with all year long instead of moving teacher to teacher to teacher. We'd like to try that and see what that does, so that we get a little bit more consistency and we get a little more follow-through on those skills we're talking about giving. And the teachers really do want to do something community-based by the end of the year so that the community can see it. So we're thinking about that, but the structure of it is going to stay the same. Yeah.
Great. And my second question is about the special education space at the Gibbs. So, as you know, there's a mass regulation that says facilities and classrooms serving only students with disabilities shall be at least equal in all physical respects to the average standards of general education facilities and classrooms. There's a room that I've identified on this map, which I believe is called 202A, which is used for substantially separate special education classes, which is, about 200 square feet with no windows. Some kids have multiple classes in that room. They can spend up to 3 periods, almost half their day there. You have said, in response to this, that there are other rooms available for the teacher to move to, but this is a special education teacher with different materials, different students, and I don't think that worked out. So I know the setup might have resulted from last-minute staffing and programming changes, but I just can't imagine how anyone thinks it's an acceptable room to be used as a special education classroom. So my question is whether you plan to continue to use this as a special education classroom in the future?
So I know exactly which room that you're talking about, and you're right, there are spaces, other spaces that those students can break out into, and they do sometimes and they don't always, and you're right, some of it is because of the logistics of moving all of those things and setting up the room the way that they had wanted it to be set up. Wendy's currently actually located next to that room, and what our plan is to not use that room as a special education room anymore. That doesn't mean that there won't be some special education things occurring in that room. I mean, we've been talking about how we better look at the cohort of students that we're receiving and figuring out, where are the numbers best serviced in these rooms. Wendy's actually going to move out of that office. She's going to be down on the first floor with me. We spread us out because it's always nice to have eyes in different places, and Wendy was able to kind of access what was going on in that corner, but we feel like it's better served for that office, which is bigger and has a whole wall of windows, actually, to become a special education space. She's going to move down with me, and then the room that those students are in is going to be more of a, we're hoping it can be a space where if kids can't be in the classroom but do need a space to do work, that would facilitate that better. We also are thinking about some of the spaces that we have on the first floor. Our reading teachers share a space, and that's a little bit bigger, but maybe they share different space, and that becomes a room. So there is definitely some talk about shifting those things around as we're building the schedule.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had just a couple quick questions.
Sure.
One for the project-based learning. I remember there were some problems that some kids couldn't participate because of others' conflicting schedules. And I'm wondering how many kids there were, and if in the next year we'll be able to decrease that number.
Well, look at you.
I would say that it was the students that were not taking project block might be a total of 20. It's not a lot. When the schedule was built over the summer, the schedule was built primarily to have project block corresponding with band, chorus, and orchestra. And it couldn't. It needed to be in periods 1 through, for the band, chorus, and orchestra kids, it needed to also be during periods 1 through 6. So I worked pretty hard on the schedule at the end of the summer to put some project blocks into teacher schedules during the day. We have the schedule already with John Amaral, who's been working with us. He already knows that this was an issue that we had last year. He's already got project blocks built into periods 1 through 6. So hopefully we'll be able to offer, there still could be a small number of students who don't have project block. And that would be because we have students who take band, chorus, and orchestra and also have math intervention. Or reading, or need an academic support. And there's just no room in their schedule for all of that, and band, chorus, and orchestra, and project block. It does.
It's not enough hours in the day.
And there are, of that 20 that I mentioned, there are some students who are taking band, chorus, and orchestra and have reading support or math support. So there is just nowhere for me to put it in their schedule, and that was the conversation I had with their parents. The majority of students who did not get project block, their parents called me, and I kind of went through the schedule with them and said, this is why. And once I was able to explain it to the folks, they were like, okay, math support is more important to me than project block, or band, chorus, and orchestra is more important to me than project block. So I'm cool with that, Wendy. We'll stick with that. Yeah, our hope is that everybody gets it. And, now that it's built into periods 1 through 6, they'll be able to get it with with different teachers, because kind of the pigeonhole I had this year, because I was kind of dropping it into teachers, is that there might be a student or a few students who have 2 science projects as opposed to 3 different projects, and that's just
Correct.
because during period 2, my only teachers that are available are science teachers.
Right.
And that's just the way
That
it
was a learning
because-
curve.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I appreciate your question, because that's one of the things we really built the school on, right? I mean, we talked about those executive functioning skills, and that's where we embedded them. I am happy to report, though, that I think, and this is what I was hoping would happen, when teachers start having that focus and they teach that way through projects, it spills over into other classes. And we're starting to see that happen, and them reference, well, you know how we do in Project Block? This is how we're going to executively function through this, or in advisory. So I see Project Block, the needs of what we need to do there changing. I see it changing as 5th grade starts to come up a little bit more with it, and as 7th and 8th grade, so we're kind of that middle piece that's going to define what the growth of that looks like. But I appreciate you asking it, because it's important. It's important that kids get that. Yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing was just a suggestion. I've wondered if we couldn't have the 5th grade dance, which brings all the kids from the different, at the Gibbs. And the kids could, the current students could even get the thing set up for the incoming.
Are you talking about the one that the rec holds?
Yeah, but
I've often wanted to talk to the rec about that dance. I'm actually very glad that you bring it up. If we were to do it there, I would want to be able to compensate staff to be there from our school. Would we fit?
No. My
In the
gut
gym.
says we wouldn't fit in the gym. We fit enough in the gym with kids sitting down.
Yeah, I don't know if they could dance in there comfortably.
I'm not sure they have as much turnout as you're thinking of.
We
But
could
that's-
tr-
Anyway, it's
we-
a suggestion.
We
It's-
could try to do an assembly and dance them there and see what
I
happens.
mean,
Yeah.
I've never been, so I don't know what the turnout is, but, my concern would be if we had, because I've gone to dances at the Audison, right? So we have the cafeteria, and they're by grade, and there's not a big turnout there, but I'd be worried about having 300
Yeah.
students in the gym dancing.
Well, we do need to do a little work with that. So I'm glad you
It's a-
brought it up.
If it doesn't work,
But I
great.
certainly wouldn't want to
Just a
support it,
thought.
but I would just.
No,
Way to
I
get
hear
the
you.
floor polished.
What?
Way
It's a way to get the floor polished, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 lunches, so our cafeteria, it's,
No, we couldn't do it there.
It's too small.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's been
You're
great
most
hearing
welcome.
about the school.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the next update.
thanks.
Okay. So moving on, we have vote to approve the superintendent's FY20 budget. Mr. Hayner.
First off, I'd like to apologize to the committee, the superintendent, and the CFO. The other night, at the the building town committee, I was made aware, and I've only been on this committee for 8 years, that facilities is not a town-wide thing. It is actually separate budgets to each one of the different groups. I thought the town had it all, and I took a look at the budget regarding facilities that I should have done over a month ago. I have a concern that in the budget, and I will stand corrected, I talked to Mr. Mason about this today, I could only find 4 items with regard to repair listed in the budget. 2 of them were for elevator repairs and 2 were for roof repairs, and that came to a total of $71,000. I'm a little concerned that next year's budget, if that's all there is for repairs, being on the building committee, knowing some of the conditions of some of our buildings, especially roofs and things of that nature. So if you could help me just understand where repairs, if there were, came up with $71,000 increase for next year's in the repair part of the budget.
In long range, in
And, well,
capital
long-range
budget or
planning.
here, capital budget or here?
I'm talking about the fiscal 20 budget for building repairs.
Capital, okay.
And, not capital, and aside from repairs, preventive maintenance, which we've had a problem in the past, we've been working on very hard with the new facilities director to get ahead of projects and stuff. Again, I apologize for bringing this last minute, And so I have a concern about it, that's all, going forward. Thank you.
Well, we share your concern. Making sure that our buildings are safe and well-maintained is a high priority. While we have a town school facilities department, there is some division in monies on this. And some of our money is divided in different accounts, which Mr. Mason can talk about. But one of the things that you mentioned, I think it's really important that people understand this. There's been a huge effort over the last couple of years to catalog the maintenance needs in every aspect of schools into a computer database, so that we can know that next year we need to change all these different filters, we need to do this particular type of cleaning, have this kind, whatever it might be to maintain a school. And the effort has been is to make sure when we've had these building projects, which you know being on permanent building, that all of that gets downloaded into a computer program. So there is a lot of communication between the facilities department and the school department. And there's already monies allocated for those kind of maintenance things that have been projected. There are routine things that we know that we have to do anyway. And then there is the unexpected. And the unexpected does happen, and we might have to go to the rental facilities account. That money in that account is all for facilities. And we also work with the facilities department, and they also help prioritize some of that. You might want to talk a little bit more about just the general way we put it in the operating budget.
Yeah, so thank you for asking the question first. So the budget that we proposed is a level funded budget for the most part. But a budget's a tool, right? So most of the line items within facilities are aligned based on how it was spent in the past. So sometimes preventative maintenance items are actual supplies that are purchased to cover. So those are built into the lines, and it not necessarily would go under a maintenance line. So if we were going to look into the detail as that. But what I can say overall for the facilities budget, we've increased the budget in terms of the non-wages expenditures by about 2%, and allocating them into the appropriate lines to cover the preventative maintenance. And as Dr. Bodie has mentioned as well, is that capital expenditures, we will be able to, if we monitor the budget with the facilities department, at the end, if there are projects that are minor capital improvements, we are able to try to cover that in the budget. Major capital improvements, we do go through the normal capital process with the capital planning committee.
If I may, my concern is that as far as repairs, we've identified two lines. Roof repairs that were under two. One was for $840, and one was for $8,444. The line number is 82404. Then there were two on elevator maintenance, and one of them was $53,000. I'm assuming that must be the high school. I could be wrong. It could be all the high school. There was another one for $8,000. So they came to $71,000. I think that'd be great if that's all the repairs we had for the whole year, but I don't think, I think there's gonna be other repairs. We have playgrounds and things of that nature. Those things that are in the from capital planning and stuff, I realize won't show up in our budget. And I understand that. But I'm just concerned, I don't want us to be where we were 5-6 years ago with building up. We're seeing the results of issues with the windows and the roof at Hardy right now. And that came, I don't want to look back, but that's a problem. With the plans through you, John Donazio, facilities directors, the current one and the prior one, and as Dr. Bodie just said, getting ahead of it, identifying, and doing preventive maintenance ahead of time is saving money. I'm just nervous, and I'm not looking necessarily right now for an answer, but there's almost $3 million, that was for salaries. in the facilities throughout the thing. It looks like there's only $71,000 in the budget for repairs, and I'm concerned. I don't want to have to rob Peter to pay Paul later on if we have a catastrophe.
So in the end, I just wanted to respond to you, because I do appreciate this feedback. So, yes, as you mentioned, salaries do increase. Those are contractual obligations to the level. If we want to reduce staffing, that's a whole different
No, I accept that.
conversation. But the salaries that we are obligated to based on what the town has negotiated does rise higher than what we can fund the non-wages expenditures. But overall, we've increased the budget by 2%. And if you were to go look at those individual lines, for example, elevator maintenance, according to the document, is between the two lines has increased over $31,000. And that more aligned to what you've spent, well, the district spent prior to fiscal 19. And then we have adjusted, so part of the budget process was looking at prior years, looking at how the expenditures were, seeing what we do need, and then aligning it based on how is we going to spend going forward.
So do we have, has the facilities department shared with you folks what's going to be needed for preventive maintenance going forward for the next year? Let me put it that way.
So
How much it's going to cost?
So we talk on a level of magnitude in terms of what's going forward. And we are still trying to prioritize going even further than the next fiscal year. So me coming in February is taking some time, or January is taking some time to get all of that aligned. But if there's a major change or deviation from the budget, we will come up to the school committee and adjust as needed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Seuss?
So I think actually information that we need is what's in the capital plan, because vast majority of repairs are made from the capital plan's budget. So what do we have in the capital plan for next year? I just don't even know that.
I think that's beyond scope right now.
I was just
for-
curious.
We can get that information
get
for
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because
It's
that's.
about $1.3 million of items that are for capital planning for this year.
Because I personally don't want to see vast majority of capital plan stuff in our budget, right? I mean, it's
understand that,
great
but
that we have this relationship with the town,
preventive
where the
maintenance-
town recognizes our needs and they put
But
it into this
preventive maintenance
plan.
would not be part of a capital plan.
Right.
This is an annual thing going forward to fix up those things that we've neglected in the past, bring them up to scale, and maintain all our new programs. We've got several brand-new buildings, new facilities in the buildings. We want to maintain them at max efficiency and going forward. That's my concern, not the
Okay.
capital. Thank you.
So it sounds like you'd like this to be a future agenda item. a
Something for
discussion of-
facilities
yeah,
subcommittee.
Or, yeah, actually, our
Fine.
facilities. subcommittee.
I'll work with the CFO and I guess Mr. Nesbitt. He's the facilities director.
Yeah, Steve Mesterak, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any, Mr. Cardin?
Thanks. So yeah, so in just following up on that.
Yes.
So the prior facilities director, Ruthie Bennett, had come to us and shown us, this new software, I forget something
School
guy.
Dude?
School Dude,
School
yeah.
Dude.
Yep.
And in it, you can plan out for the next few years what we're going to paint
Right.
here, we're going to replace this valve there, all these preventative maintenance items. But what didn't happen was to cost those out and figure out if we can afford that, right? So I think that's the step that still needs to be done by someone. And with the transitions on both sides, obviously that didn't happen. But it's great that we have this maintenance plan, but we need to make sure we're funding it. So
Correct. I
That
think-
that would be a next step.
I would agree with everything that's been presented or discussed here tonight. I am working with Steve Nesterak on trying to get more accurate data into School
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
and to then also make sure that the information is there, it will be useful. So that's a process that we're working through, and also training the staff to properly use it.
Great. Now, my other question is actually about special education. Ms. Elmer isn't here, but perhaps you can pass it on to her. We are approving 2 new programs basically as part of this budget. And now that we are approving it and she can go forward with her planning, I would like to see a plan for these programs. One's at the middle school and one's at the high school. Right now, we just have a teacher in a room. At the high school, there may not even be a room because there's no rooms available. But what we need is, a program description. What is this program going to be? And a rough plan of operations for this program. She made a remark at the CPAC meeting when she was talking about this week, that of course this program will be supported, it won't be just one teacher, this program will be supported by other people, like a social worker will help support the program. But where are we going to find time for a social worker to be able to support the program? For the life skills program at the high school, is there going to be a cooking component? Are they going to be able to get into the kitchen to do that? All these kinds of information, I think, this is a program expansion. I think that should come to us to be informed about that at some point before the end of the year. Thanks.
Will do.
Okay, any other comments, questions about the budget?
Right. Just to clarify, because at the budget, this came out at the budget subcommittee meeting, the budget was presented originally and is before you in Schedule 3 in our existing budget transfer categories before we updated the policies with the MASC. So the MASC standard policy has a different set of categories. We adopted that policy based on the recommendation of Mike Gilbert from the MASC. Mr. Denizio said he didn't care, either way was fine. Michael prepared a comparison for us for the budget subcommittee, and we looked at the two sets of categories, and our existing categories was by far much better. The other categories lumped $48 million into one category, and it just was too much of a big lump. So when we vote, we'll be voting for these existing categories. Thanks.
Do we need a motion to approve the budget?
I'm seeing, yes, we'll need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the budget for FY20.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the budget?
So just to update people, there are discussions with the Long Range Planning Committee about what an operating override will look like. Also about, the fact that we've had a huge Chapter 70 increase. So the likelihood is that there will be a proposal to include in the override plan, which will be probably a 4-year plan, additional funding for the schools, amount totally up in the air right now. But if that comes forward, then it will be like last year when we got the additional Chapter 70 money. We will have to figure out, when we find out the amount, we will have to figure out what we want to do with that money. There are on this sheet some additional buckets that the administration has prioritized, but that's not something that we've discussed really that much at subcommittee or at this table. So there may be other priorities that come up, and we'll get to that later.
Okay. And just to clarify for our viewers at home, that when we say we have received more Chapter 70, the town has received more. It didn't come straight to us.
We haven't got it yet.
And we haven't gotten it yet either, yeah. It's talking about for next year. But, okay. Then at this point, all those in favor of the motion to approve the budget, say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that,
I abstain.
oh, okay,
And-
Mr. Hinger.
Just for clarification, it's the first year I haven't voted against it. My preference is that the town meeting should be the ones that cut, not us. This year I've gone up one step, just abstaining this year.
Okay, thank you for clarification. So we now have an approved budget. And now we move on to the superintendent's report.
So let me just mention that we are going to be presenting the budget at the Finance Committee on March 20th. That will be at 7:30. And you're all welcome to be there. The Finance Committee met last night.
Community safety?
Pardon?
Community safety?
Community safety. We've had the budget online for a while, and we have sent them the electronic link. We also provided the Finance Committee with the same binders that you have. With the idea that if there's any changes tonight, that we would give them the addendums before Wednesday. But we're good. I don't have a lot, a few things. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate all of our student athletes. They had a great season. We've talked about some of their results the last meeting, but the hockey team this year was ranked 4th in the state. And as a result of that, they were invited into the Super 8 and played competitively. They did well, but unfortunately they are now out of that. I don't know how it is finally shaken out, but they had a great season, and just want to congratulate them. They were Middlesex League champions, and all of our teams had a great year. So congratulations to all, because I think one of the things that can be said about our athletic program is that we look at it as an extension of learning for the high school. That some of these soft skills we've been talking about, that Ms. DeFrancisco talked about, are things we try to encourage in all of our athletic teams. So, anyway, we also have some terrific art projects going on. I think that it's been in the paper, the 2019 Arlington Public Art Youth Banner Project. And the 100 Arlington secondary students submitted designs for the project, and 20 of these were chosen to become the large outdoor vinyl banners. These banners will be hung along Mass Ave at Arlington Center in April and May. The theme this year for the banner competition was trees. The reception for all the artists will be on March 21st from 5 to 7 in the Media Center of the high school, and you are all invited. And the awards presentation will be at 6 o'clock. Each year, the family of a former Arlington High School student, Gracie James, generously donates funds from this project in her memory. The project is coordinated by the Arlington Public Art and the Arlington Public School Visual Art Department. And more information on that is located on our website. Also, there is going to be an art exhibit that is the annual 2019 high school art exhibit. This is the poster they've been having around. The art exhibit is, the reception is March 21st, and the exhibit will go on from March 21st to April 11th. So
What time is the reception? 5?
the reception is from 5 to 7 on the 21st.
Okay.
And there'll be refreshments and live music. But if you've never had a chance to go see one of these exhibits, they're really quite extraordinary. They are, I think they're holding it the same place they have in past years, which is down in that adjacent room to the cafeteria. And that's it. There is going to be the high school musical the first weekend in April, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the next meeting. Basically, that is it. Did you have anything? No? Good.
Okay, great. Technology plan?
The technology plan, okay. Oh, yes.
And the building committee.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with the building committee update. We have had a lot of presentations recently organized by Mr. Thielman, and we have gone to Capital Committee, Capital Planning Committee, the Finance Committee. I was been at those, the Park and Recs, been to Permanent Town Building Committee. When I say we, there's different members of the committee that have gone to these. We've had the Open Space Committee, the Tree Committee. And we still have more. Sustainable Arlington was last night here, and there's still more to come as we go forward. And the Select Board is coming up.
Select Board, the school committees are our next meeting. There's others coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Disability Commission, we're trying to get that planned.
Something about
So
sports.
Transportation Advisory Council Committee, Arlington Bike Advisory Council is next week. There's a lot of them.
And you're
Arlington
going,
Livable Streets Association, Ryan Katowski went to. Yeah, so we're,
We're out there talking with people, and we've planned tours for the town meeting members, both the new members and candidates as well. So we have two tours planned. We will have in May more open to the general public, as we have in the past. So there's a lot more that we're planning, and we certainly invite suggestions if there's other groups that we should be going and visiting.
Do you have a date for the town meeting members? I assume it's going to be before.
25th.
Before the election.
There's one on the 25th, there's one April 8th. April,
Well, can't
April
have it April 8th
April 9th.
for potential members.
It's,
No.
you'll,
both,
all town meeting members will be getting an invitation
Right,
in
the
the mail.
25th.
But I
And
heard Dr.
candidates
Bodie
as well.
said
And candidates.
all candidates, so.
And
that-
And
all
candidates as well.
April 9th is town meeting tours as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We submitted on time the preferred schematic to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and that process is continuing, and we'll be able to update you further once we know more information. But this committee here will have the full presentation, and I believe we scheduled it for the 28th.
Yeah,
Right.
town manager will be here.
We'll be back.
Yeah.
We'll have a,
With respect to the technology plan, there has been a lot of conversations going on about the technology plan, and we will be coming to you with that plan. We're at the end of a 5-year plan, and as you're aware, the Capital Planning Committee has the last few years and did again for next year allot $420,000 for the plan, in addition to some of the money that is also, it's a much smaller amount of money, which is in the technology department, that is the director, David Good. We're really looking very carefully at how we go forward. In the past plans, we've had a cycle of refreshment and at different schools that have been also fueled and supported by some of the building constructions that we've had. Certainly, the Gibbs project provided that school with the technology, which then was able, the technology that they had at Odison was been able to be redistributed. We've had some update at Stratton with that project. In fact, that became a one-to-one situation there. So that is, they have very new equipment. But we've taken, now the opportunity to go forward and planning out for the next 5 years, we've had a lot of meetings about this in terms of what makes the most sense. And we're looking at things such as functionality. Is the functionality that we've chosen in the devices we've had really meet the needs? And should we be more differentiated in how we choose which device? I think we are at the place where we want to be agnostic about the device and be really looking more at the platforms. However, having said that, you also don't want to have a lot of different types of computers or iPads because there's just a need to be able to maintain them. Right now, in the district, we have about 6,000 different devices, either iPads or Chromebooks or computers that are in our in our different labs. It's becoming very significant, and we're looking very carefully also at how we provide teachers with professional development they might need for these devices. In fact, we had a meeting just today planning our summer orientation for new teachers, and that was an important component of that plan, is how we, what type of professional development they're going to have, at least at the orientation, and what will continue. So it's not only just about the technology plan with respect to the device, but it will be also looking at the support we need to give all of our staff. I think that we'll probably be ready with something by May. That's sort of what our goal is right now. And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say further about this.
As Dr. Bodie mentioned, I think also part of that consideration is looking at the cycle of transition as the computers age, the learning devices age, how the technology plan takes in consideration, are we going to look at a 5-year refresh cycle, or is it going to be a 3 to 4 year refresh cycle? So that's also going into, the consideration. Also looking at where the bulk of the aging equipment is. We don't want to have one school to have, aging equipment while other schools, because of their construction budget, were able to refresh those devices so that they have the newer devices. So we are looking at whether or not we're going to continue with refreshing schools 2 at a time, or we're going to have to, start focusing on whether or not there's certain bulk of aging equipment at any individual school. So we have a meeting tomorrow morning, in fact, or tomorrow afternoon with David Good, and I've also asked other representatives from the elementary level, high school level, math and science department, Matt Coleman and Larry Weathers, from those particular departments, in order to weigh in on the decision of what that refresh cycle is going to look like, and also, as Dr. Bodie alluded to, like looking at the type of devices that will provide the functionality that each one of the departments will need in order to meet the learning standards for those content areas. We also have been meeting with the union in order to make sure that we're providing them with a inventory list to make sure all the individuals who need a certain, or all the individuals who need a certain device are getting them. And so we're looking at 1-to-1, what the saturation levels will look like. Will it be 1-to-1, or will it be teachers sharing a cart? So all that is taken into consideration. And also looking at the Gibbs this year, the 1-to-1, where students receive Chromebooks and their usage of them, and then getting feedback on how that model is working, and whether or not we need to continue in that model or go to a different model where students are not carrying the devices with them from class to class. So there's a lot of things that we're considering, but we should be able to come up with a plan between by the early May or mid-April to present to Dr. Bodie, so she can present that to you as a committee.
Dr. Seuss?
So a few years ago, there was a lot of discussion, and I know it's just before your time, a lot of discussion about bring your own devices, and but it turned out that we were in this kind of rut where students were asked to bring their own devices, but if they brought them, not enough students brought them, so the teachers didn't, and they didn't have enough backups in the classroom, so teachers didn't use the devices, so then students stopped bringing the devices because they were heavy and they weren't being used at all. And so I surveyed, it was like, I was talking, we're doing bring your own devices, and I surveyed everybody I knew, and people were like, yeah, they're not using those things. My kids, not going to throw something else in their backpack if they're never going to be used. So are we out of that rut? I mean, is it because, and if we're out of the rut, is it because there's enough devices in the classrooms that can be accessed by students so that even if no student brings their device, they can still use the technology? Or are we still in that kind of rut?
Well, that's what I mean when I'm looking at the saturation level. So we need to get feedback from teachers to understand what is the usage.
So we don't know that yet.
To go straight to your point. We have ways of getting that. We have ways electronically, reports that we can generate from David Good's office in order to see how, see how much teachers are using the device. We don't necessarily, that report's not going to share with us like what they're using it for. So we need to get that feedback from the individual teachers. So we can get both.
If we get that feedback, when would that happen? When were you looking to get that feedback?
Well,
the end of this year, or?
No, within the continuum, like, that's the information that we need in order to help inform our plan moving forward.
The answer to your first question is that they are available on carts. I do not think that there's any issue in the district right now where a teacher cannot access a cart for use of a computer in the classroom. Can students still bring their own device? Yes, and there's been recommendations on what the device could be. But we are at the point where it is accessed. Now, is there a cart in every single classroom? No. Do we need a cart in every single classroom? We're not sure that that's the case. Certainly, we know, I have a teacher advisory committee, and, certainly Mr. Levy and I talk a lot about all of these in terms of getting feedback from teachers, because we want them to be very much a voice in this. And I don't think access to computers is an issue, but what I do think is an issue is functionality, and we're looking very carefully at that.
Right, exactly. So I don't want to send a message that if teachers need a cart or they need a digital learning device, they don't have access to it. They do. We just need to know what the level of access is needed. So that's what I mean. When I talk about saturation level, I mean, do we need, a couple of teachers sharing a cart, or do we need a cart for, in that particular teacher's classroom because they use it to that level? So that's what we're talking about. But I don't want to send the message, all students have access, all teachers have access to digital learning devices in Arlington. We have enough for everyone.
Mr. Carden?
Thank you. So a couple of things. So first, the plan that's on the website ended in 2018. 2017-18 is the last year of the former technology plan. So again, I've been talking about it for a while, and I feel like, again, we've fallen behind, and we're sort of in a morass where we keep just replacing devices and without a strategy. So I hope by May that we will have a strategy, a draft strategy that we can discuss and refine pretty quickly going forward. I don't know if we need a motion to do that, or we can trust that that will be done. As two main issues I think that we need to address in this plan is this issue of one-to-one. I don't know why we're reluctant to go to one-to-one. I think it's worked really well at the Gibbs. At the Audison, on the other hand, the devices are getting trashed because there's no ownership. They're just sitting there in a cart. Somebody pulls it out for a class, throws it back in. They go to a different class, they pull out another. If they're using a device in that class, they pull out a device there, use a different device, throw it back in. So I don't, if we have all these devices in every single classroom, why wouldn't we assign it to a student, give them ownership of their device, particularly at the middle school? Just something I really think you need to look into. And then finally, from an equity standpoint, Google Classroom is a wonderful tool. It's being adopted pretty quickly by the teachers, but we then have the issue with access at home. And I think as part of our plan, we need to seriously address that issue. I know that AEF is willing to support something in that area, if that's an area the district wants to move in, to have loaner devices to people who need them. But I think with the adoption of Google Classroom, yes, they're required to give an alternative means to submit their homework, but if everybody else in the class is using Google Classroom, and there are students who can't because they don't have access to a device at home, that's something I think we should address in our plan. Thanks.
May I respond?
Yeah, can I respond to that too?
I'm not sure where that information is about computers being trashed at Audison, because that is not the case. There are always going to be damage to computers, keys come off. I think one of the things we're working on is trying to get a regular methodology. We have it, actually say we have it, we just need to make sure everybody follows it, is how we put in tickets and technology. The truth of the matter is the one-to-one is not working as well as you would think at Gibbs, because when kids carry around a Chromebook all day, we have found a lot more breakage in Gibbs. And so we're looking at that issue as well, because one of the issues at Gibbs was that, just a technical thing, is that when the kids would be reluctant to close the Chromebook because then you'd be logged off. So the technology department's problem solved that, so there would be a very quick login, because we didn't want the kids walking around with screen open. There have been a lot more breakage in this system than we've had in any school. I think that what happens, I think, is that and this happens across the district, not any particular school. If a Chromebook isn't working, they may just go back and find another one in there and the students do this. So we're really very aware of that and trying to get better systems. And I know, you look like you wanted to say something.
Having been part of, having taught sixth grade in the past and having one-to-one iPads, and this year now having a Chromebook card in my class, I actually find students taking more responsibility this year where I haven't had any broken Chromebooks. I assign them to each student so the students know which Chromebook to get. They put them back when they need to. They get them when they need to. I find this system of not being one-to-one with the Chromebooks more beneficial and students not losing them than in the past. But it was sixth grade, seventh grade, but I find the system working great, having been part of one-to-one 3 to 4 years previously.
And I would like to preface the fact, as I mentioned before, sure, one-to-one sounds great. However, we have to look at the learning standards and what the learning standards dictate what we need. And if we don't need to have one-to-one because that's not the way that we're using the Chromebooks, then there's no reason for us to go one-to-one. So we have to make sure that we're using the learning standards to guide our decision and not just arbitrarily saying we want to be one-to-one. We have to have a reason for it, and it has to be associated with those standards. What is the learning objective that we're pursuing in that particular content area or that class? So that will give you a methodology for figuring out whether or not you want to be one-to-one or you want to have teachers share a cart. Secondly, we have a system in place right now to provide students who do not have any type of technology at home in order to provide them with a digital learning device. And we've done that very successfully since I've been here. If there's some historical context or data that I don't have, I'd be more than happy to receive that. But since I've come in, I've worked with David Good and Susan Bisson, our instructional technology director, in order to make sure that all students have what they need, even if they have something that they need to take home. So I'm not aware of any student in the district right now that doesn't have that access. And if there are students that you know of that do not have access that you've heard of in the community, if you could share that information with us, that'd be greatly appreciated. Mm-hmm. Also, I do think that it's important for us as a district to not make the learning device so critical to students learning that if they do have a homework assignment or they have a project that they have to complete at home, it's not dependent upon that digital learning device. We do have other ways to provide access. We have the media centers that stay open past when, at the end of the day. We also have a partnership with Robbins Library. So there's ways that we're getting around it right now. But I also want to preface that I would not support any type of policy that says that this is what you need to have in order to be a successful student in Arlington Public Schools. I do not want to make it dependent upon whether or not students have access to technology. It's more important that they're meeting the learning objectives, and that's a way that we can assess them in that way, and we need to provide alternative ways for that assessment.
Ms. Morgan.
So I have a sixth grader who's at the Gibbs now, and I will say that the one-to-one Chromebook for her has been life-changing for her academic experience, that she has one machine that she is responsible for. I get that a lot of her classmates can't seem to take care of theirs, and it's really frustrating when you have a kid who's really benefiting from checking out a machine at the beginning of the day, bringing it with her, able to manage and maneuver through the various things she needs for her classes. But, regardless of what we end up doing, whether it's the one-to-one or the carts or, whatever, I really hope that in the next plan, if it's a 5-year plan, we're looking at least for consistency across the experience. So that, she's at the Gibbs now, she's using a Chromebook. Is she going to go to the Audison next year and they're going to give her, is it going to be a different thing? And I understand that the technology is changing, but I do hope that part of that 5-year plan, part of the goal can be that we're trying to have a consistent, K through 5 is very different. And I would argue maybe that, I would love to see some consistency 5 through 12 ideally, because I think 5th grade, it could be more consistently implemented. But I will say that our experience with her as a student in 6th grade, and it is very attributable to this machine, has been really life-changing. And so I hope that it continues to be something that we can do, but also that we can, whatever it is that you guys are the experts, right? Figure out what we need to do to meet these learning objectives, and then let's implement it as best as we can across as wide a number of grades as possible, and as, ideally within this, next 5 years, because I think they need to see that. And I think it's really hard to have a kid who makes tremendous progress under one system, then go to the next year and it's different, and you're like, oh, I don't know, is this gonna work out for us? So that's what I hope can be part of these conversations that you guys are having.
Well, again, I appreciate the fact that your daughter's had a very positive experience, but we have to look at the aggregate of students, and we also have to look at the learning standards. Again, I go back to the learning standards. If the learning standards dictate we need one-to-one, that's what we'll need, that's what we'll do. But if it dictates that a shared cart will meet those learning objectives, then that should be the model.
I just hope that you guys can come up with a model that actually is a model and isn't done kind of like piecemeal. So that's what I would like to see, as part of this plan is some sense of like, these are the objectives we're trying to meet. This is the model that we're trying to do. Because I read a lot of stuff and I've never seen anything. So I appreciate that that's part of your conversations.
Any more comments? I'd just like to add that as you do this, I think it's also good to think about what parents are providing information for parents, because I know as they get into 5th grade, 6th grade, that's when you start thinking, well, maybe we want to look at a computer or a device. And I think, yes, there's some households which can't, but there are some which can. Most can't afford multiple devices. And so I get calls, what am I supposed, what is my kid going to be using at the Gibbs? What are they going to be using? What should I get them? And so right, but they're calling me before Christmas or something, and it's. I'm saying it was hard to find exactly what model, what functionality and stuff was needed, and that's something that would be helpful for parents, and also make sure with an eye that they're not going to be buying another one the next year. It's like,
No,
that's.
we're not flip-flopping, and if you took that away from my comments, I'm sorry, but we're not flip-flopping, but one of the issues is sometimes what teachers need is different what students need. We are still going to be having iPads from K to 2, and we are still having Chromebooks as we go in the upper grades, beginning in grade 3. However, at the high school, for example, in science labs, we're not sure Chromebooks are the right choice for our carts, and we're not sure we're looking into what that might be. So what I'm saying is that there is going to be some differentiation, perhaps not for teachers compared to what the students have, and there might be some needs that certain disciplines might need, for example, even visual arts. So, but in terms of what is our dominant device that we're using is Chromebooks. And we're using the type that are touchscreen. And that is our major computer. But it would be not wise of us to just go continue. You have to be reflective in this. First of all, technology changes. The things that the teachers, the more they use technology themselves, they become more conscious that they need to be able to have devices that match what they want to do in their classrooms. So we're listening to teachers, we're looking at all of this, and it takes a while. This discussion's been going on since September. And I think we're getting close to really being able to say, all right, this is what we're going to do for the next few years. Now, I will tell you that David Good, our Director of Technology, would say, if he was here, a 5-year plan probably is not a good time frame because things change so much that it might be much better to be thinking more in 3-year intervals as we go forward. And that's sort of where we are thinking right at the moment.
Okay. Mr. Hayner?
Also, can I just add one thing to that? I think the school committee could appreciate the fact that we want to be fiscally responsible as well. So if teachers are not using Chromebooks in every, class to the level of having a certain saturation rate, you would come back to us and ask us, why are we using this particular model? And I want to assure all of you that whatever model we decide to move forward, I would definitely have the technology team here. We will be able to explain it, and we would have the evidence to back up that decision. So you would see a clear thought process as to why we are recommending this particular plan, and this is why we would move forward in this area. And that would be based upon feedback that we get from teachers, looking at student usage, and making sure that we would also look at whether or not we're going to look at a 3-year refresh cycle. So, and the functionality of the device that we choose to utilize, and then why we're using a different device in various content areas. You will be able to see a clear thought pattern, and you would be able to ask questions based upon that thought pattern. So we would have the evidence to support that decision.
Mr. Hayner?
I think that's commendable, but I'd like you to also consider, in going forward, the idea of leasing. I think purchasing computers is really, I find it difficult. I buy a computer, this thing here has been here for 8 years. It's only because I like it and I know how to use it, and I'm afraid to go to anything new. But I'm a Luddite anyway. I accept that. Students, children, the teachers, they're right at the cutting edge of all this stuff. And as you say, things are outdated the moment you get them. Purchasing, I don't think is viable. I think we should look into the idea of leasing going forward. If our model is to change on a regular basis in the short term, if it's 5-6 years, purchase might be more. But I'd ask you to just put that into consideration going forward in your planning. Sure. Thank you.
Dr. Seuss?
So just to clarify what I personally would love to see in a technology plan. So what we heard a few years ago is that we were reaching a state in the state of education where technology was no longer auxiliary, but it was actually transforming teaching and learning, and that we were actually achieving things we couldn't achieve without it. So what I'd like to see is less a focus on the particular devices. That should be an appendix or something extra, but just what is the vision for how technology is going to be used in the district to transform teaching and learning. And then there can be a discussion of, and these are the devices we need to do that. But in terms of the plan, the 3-year plan, the 5-year plan, it should be what is the vision for how technology is going to help us achieve the things that we want to do educationally.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And now we move on.
You can go on.
Okay. But that was helpful.
Good.
Okay, so consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence. Approval of warrant number 1.
Would you pull the school committee minutes, please?
Approval of warrant number 19171 dated 2/28/2019, total warrant amount $288,192.30. Approval of trip, AHS Social Studies Vietnam trip, February 2020. Kevin,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Now we have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular school committee dated 2/28/19.
Second.
Someone want to move?
On the,
I'll move it.
Oh, nice. Second.
Okay.
on the second paragraph, Mr. Thielman's listed as a member of the committee and staff as well.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
He can decide which one he wants to be recognized as. That's minor.
Which one do you get a salary?
Down, yeah, double the salary. Down several paragraphs down, I think it's the fourth one under the starting time. It states, Mr. Haynes supports the concept of the motion, but will not support if the changes will happen once the union approves the start time change. I would ask the committee to allow me to strike after the word motion right up to the period of that sentence. Thank you.
Okay,
Move to
so,
approve as amended.
okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so this passed as amended. So now we have subcommittee liaison reports. Budget?
So we've covered most of the subjects. Finance Committee next Wednesday. We scheduled a forum on the 5-year plan for April 10th.
10th.
Yeah, at 7 o'clock, place to be determined. I think that's it for now.
Great. Community relations.
We need to set up a time. We've gotten, some people have responded, and we're just waiting for the remainder. We got 9 applicants to the Human Rights Committee, and this is a different world than it was a few years ago when we'd have to sort of pull people to like get them involved in things. I mean, it's really testament to the spirit of volunteerism in Arlington, I have to say.
Okay. Curriculum.
We met on March 7th, and a Arlington resident, Lynette Culverhouse, made a presentation on a life skills decision-making program, and the assistant superintendent were there, and we encouraged her to speak to community education.
Okay. Facilities?
He's setting up a meeting with the CFO and facilities director and the members of the committee as soon as possible.
Okay. Policy?
We will be meeting next Tuesday, in which we will be looking at policy IJNDB, which is empowered digital use policy, policy KFD, surplus space usage, policy DBJ, budget transfer authority, as well as taking a look at the overall new policy manual. And that will be our final meeting of the school committee season.
Okay. High school, where's that? Gibbs?
We're meeting.
Okay. Are there any other liaison reports, announcements, or future agenda items? Mr. Schlickman.
Oh, yeah. I went to the Hardy School Council meeting on Tuesday, and a lot of the conversation was about the Hardy Playground. There will be a community meeting on the Hardy Playground next Thursday, the 21st at 6 p.m. at the Hardy School. The budget is limited. They're talking about how much of that budget they want to put into the rubber safety surface, so I'm sure that there are going to be some tough decisions being made with the community in consultation with the architect. And the other thing is, Dr. Seuss and I would like to report that we had a really pleasant conversation with each other on the 2nd of March over at Cafe Nerd. And it was quite lovely. It's very impressive what a wonderful colleague I have. And the joy of spending an hour with her was just superb. Unfortunately, we don't have any parents to talk to or any community members to talk to. But we had a good time.
Okay.
I thought you were going to mention the other thing, which is on Sunday.
Oh, yes.
The 17th, there's the Arlington Federation Trivia Bee. Dr. Bodie is one of the judges. She doesn't get to like weigh and
you work for, you know.
right.
You know.
But I have to say, so we will have 2 school committee members representing, and we'll have an ex-school committee member.
Alum.
An alum, yes. Will be part of our. And we have a cheeky name. Demolition, what is it?
School Demolition Committee.
School Demolition. Something like cheeky. Yes. But it's great cause, raises lots of money for education.
Bring
Good
your
thing to do.
sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Mr. Curtin.
I was going to mention that, but since you took it, I'll mention that I presented the 5-year plan to the CPAC, that's the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, meeting this week. So that was the first time I presented it. people, there were only a few people there, but they felt it was a good discussion. They didn't really have a whole lot of feedback, but they appreciated hearing what's being discussed.
Great. Nothing else. Okay. So at this point, we'll go into executive session to conduct strategy in preparation for negotiations with union and/or non-union personnel or contract negotiations with union and/or non-union, in which, if held in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect. To conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, in which, if held in an open meeting, may have a detrimental effect. Collective bargaining may also be conducted. To discuss principals' contracts, to discuss the contract for Superintendent Kathleen Bodie. And we will exit only for the purposes of adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye. So, and now go into executive session.